our next topic, the lore of Streets of Rage. So in order to kind of talk about, I'm gonna have to touch on all of the Streets of Rage games because the lore is pretty in-depth. The story remains consistent with the characters who are in the story throughout all four in the first game, right? There's the Syndicate, and the Syndicate is run by this guy named Mr. X. He's a bad guy. He's pretty evil. Obviously, there's these three police officers, Axel, Blaze, and Adam. They want to try clean up whatever the Syndicate is trying to do, right? They're going to try and get rid of them. Unfortunately, the Syndicate has a lot of puppet people in the government, and they kind of infiltrated the police, and a lot of them are in their back pocket. Like, the police are letting things slide, they're letting criminals do whatever. It's very, very frustrating for these three people who are all about, you know, being upright citizens, you know, like taking care of the mean street, cleaning up the act of whatever's going on, right? They can't do it. It's just only the three of them. They quit the police force. They say, y'all ain't doing anything to take care of this. We're going to take this issue into our own hands. Axel, Blaze, and Adam are going after the Syndicate. They're going to try and like take over and clean up whatever is going on.
Yeah.
Then they say, okay, so Blaze, like, let's talk about like each character. Like, Blaze has a strong sense of justice. She is, well, she's the one that I usually like to play as, but they all want to come together and take care of the Syndicate. And also what is cool to find out is that multiple games have more than one ending. They go out on their own to take care of Mr. X. And I guess at the end, they get rid of him.
Goodbye.
A year after, they come back and Streets of Rage 2 happens. So after they get rid of him, okay, we thought we cleaned up the streets. We thought we got rid of like all the puppet regime or whatever. They didn't happen. Like roaches, they just came back. They have to go back out. But Adam is kidnapped. And this is why, like, they have to, this is a part of the reason why they have to go back. He gets kidnapped, which is why he's not in the game. Axel and Blaze, they've moved out of the city after they got rid of Mr. X or whatever. Like, the city was like calm, everything was good. So they were like, okay, we're gonna go live our lives. Blaze, she becomes like a dance instructor. Axel becomes like bodyguard. Actually, Adam goes back to the police force after everything gets cleaned up. They find out he gets kidnapped by Mr. X, and they have to go save him. Who joins them is his son, who's Skate. Skate is actually not his son, his brother. Skate is his brother. So they join him. One day, Blaze gets a call from Skate that his brother is missing. The house has been searched, and there's a photo of Adam on the floor, chained up at the feet of Mr. X. So Axel, Blaze, Skate, and Max Thunder, that's the guy, Max Thunder, embarks to rescue Adam. When they find out Mr. X is on this island, and they have to get to the island, they have to face Mr. X and his bodyguard, Shiva. There's two endings in this game. So you can either... Hold on, I'm looking at my notes because I can't remember if this is the ending of Streets of Rage 1 or Streets of Rage 2, where you can either choose to be, okay, I think this is Streets of Rage 1. In the end of Streets of Rage 1, you could either choose to be the leader of the Syndicate, or you could fight each other if you're playing two-player, or you can get rid of the Syndicate. So then in Streets of Rage 3, after, you know, like they take down Mr. X and they escape via helicopter with Adam, Mr. X starts a research company called RoboPsi to cover up like some of the illegal stuff that he's doing. And then they're building robots, put people in office, run the city for him, and stuff like that. He has this doctor, Dr. Dam, to create the army of robots to replace important city officials, and his plan is to control the city with the bots, and the Syndicate uses a bomb to distract the police. And then there's another doctor who I guess is working in that same facility. He discovers the plan, and then he tells Blaze, and then that's how Blaze and all of the people like in their group know to go after Mr. X. That game has actually 4 endings, and the good ending, which is the one I'll say is like canon for the rest of the story,
right,
is that the police chief is captured, replaced with a dupe, but then he's freed, and then they find out that Mr. X actually lost his body. All he is a brain, and he's controlling these robots from this like cylinder thing, and then they destroy him, I guess whoever like his cronies are or whatever. The way that Streets of Rage 4 comes about is that his kids, who are the Y twins, are carrying on his evil deeds or whatever. So then that's how you get into Streets of Rage 4.
His legacy.
One big caveat to this whole lore is that Streets of Rage 3 actually was altered a lot between the US version and the Japanese version. This whole robot thing didn't happen in Streets of Rage 3 in the Japanese version.
Say what?
So when they talked about like the bombs and stuff, they took out all the mention of like the actual, it was like chemical that they used, and the whole bot thing never happened. It was like they like completely changed the story from the Japanese version. So that's why like if you play both versions, you're going to get two different kinds of stories. So for the American version, when they made Streets of Rage 4, they just kept the regular story that they went to with like the bots and stuff. Oh yeah, that's what it was. It wasn't that they turned this person into a bot, like he was like the leader of the police. It was somebody in the government. He was actually evil rather than it just being like a bot. Like it was just like some guy that was like just working with like the syndicate doing all their like nasty stuff. And so you had to take him out. Yeah, that's the main difference, that you had to take him out and that there were no bots. So that's basically the story of Streets of Rage. This whole thing with Mr. X, the syndicate, puppet regimes, people defecting from the police force and then wanted to take out and like clean up the streets on their own. The overall story of Streets of Rage.
Wow. I think it's so interesting that there was at one point, at first it sounds like American and Japanese versions were on the same lines. Then they had a little bit of fissure right at 3. It's like, we don't want to do it with robots. It's like, wait, so we can take
Which is weird. That kind of story would have like, there's lots of Japanese games that I feel like would have utilized that type of storyline.
Right.
It doesn't sound out of whack. The other side of it, like the Japanese side of it, was too serious, dealing with, maybe it was like the type of topics it was dealing with. Oh, like how you were saying in Turtles, like they're killing robots, like the footmen are robots.
Correct.
Like that would have made more sense for like the American audience.
And a lot of it, I don't know if it's the same thing for Streets of Rage here, but for Turtles, a big problem was that they had to make it okay that they were doing all of this damage to something. The funny thing is like, oh, well, you can't do it to humans, you know, like kids can't understand that aspect of it. Are you kidding me? I watched R-rated movies with my parents, and every single time, what happened though before I could watch it with them? All right, General, you know that this isn't real. Yeah, I know. No, I need you to say it or we can't watch the movie together. Again? Okay, I know that this movie is not real. And like, as funny as that sounds, it stuck with me. I knew it. I knew that these things weren't real, and I actually appreciated titles that were able to actually make, be it video games or movies or shows, that were able to make it relatable as if it was real. I know it's not real, but the realer it felt, the more connected I felt to the content.
For me, as a kid, if I was to go back and find out that not robot, it probably would have had more of an emotional impact on me in a bad way. I would have probably been kind of scared to play it, to be honest. I always thought that was just because I was like, sensitive, you know?
Right.
But
I'm glad you bring that up too, because that's my perspective on it, you know, growing up and whatnot. It just, my parents, I felt like, did a really good job of making sure you knew what was real and you knew what wasn't real. And so you understand this, you're smart enough to get it. You can go ahead and do it. It's only when I would really show my age, it's like, you know what? You're not quite getting it. You're not mature enough right now. You don't get to do this. Therefore, I want to be mature. I want to understand the boundaries. I want to understand these types of things. Now I get to enjoy more because I was willing to do that. And it's so interesting how different countries wanted to handle that differently, even within the games. Like, I bet a lot of these devs, they just wanted to make what they wanted to make. And it's like, oh no, make sure that, you know, you got to show explosions. You can't show blood.
If you want to really have creative control, you want to be able to tell your story. Kind of like Kojima, you know? Like Kojima wants to tell a story. He's not going to be sitting here thinking about, oh, if I make this game that kids are going to play, it's going to scar them for life or whatever. It's like, no. Yeah. In Streets of Rage 4, Sherry Hunter is Adam's daughter, who's one of the people you get to play as. And Floyd Araya is Dr. Zam's apprentice. And Dr. Zam is the one that called Blaze in Streets of Rage 3. Hey, yo, some weird's going down here. Y'all better come out here and check it out. Those are some of the characters. That's like some of the explanation. There's also some characters that they took out that were accessible only via Game Genie in Streets of Rage 3. It was this character in the Japanese version called Ash. Of course, that's the name that I remember. And then there was another character. I can't remember the name of it, but they took them out, I guess. Yeah, like they were just like... They were just too controversial, just didn't fit in with like this way that they changed the story for the American audience. So
again, so interesting that those different aspects were, they were part of the game. So they're like, wait, well, the American audience, it's not okay only make it available for Game Genie, so it's really going to limit people to even consider it. Because sometimes some of the Game Genie codes, you get that Game Genie booklet, if everyone remembers that. But there was also Game Genie codes that you had to find out on your own.
Yeah.
That weren't
See, I didn't know that. Never really had a Game Genie growing up. And the only time I had like a code device, like a device that altered the code of the game, was PlayStation 1. And I think the first game I used it on was like Final Fantasy 7 because I couldn't beat weapons. So that was like the first time I used like a Game Shark kind of thing.
Nice.
I think the most surprising thing for me, Mr. X becoming like a shadow of himself and just becoming a brain, but then somehow he had kids to carry on his evil legacy in Streets of Rage 4. That was very surprising.
Exactly, right? Because you think if he's only a brain, it's pretty hard to reproduce at that point in time. So
I'm guessing he must have had his evil syndicate kids, way before then. So
okay. Guess what? It's video game logic. Good enough for me.
Yep. Video games.
Let's jump on into some Cowabunga lore.
Yeah.
This is Turtles 4, Turtles in Time. You're watching right here on the screen for the Super Nintendo. Well, let's go ahead and roll it back and understand a little bit more of Turtles on the consoles to begin with. After a series of games on the NES, it was time for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to jump onto the next generation of consoles. Turtles in Time actually began as the second arcade beat-em-up for the franchise, but the SNES port of the game was renamed to Turtles 4 in the title. That way it was able to tie into the console games. I alluded to this earlier, but for those that did not know, when you see Turtles 1 on the NES, that's not Turtles 1 in Japan. It's actually called Turtles Prototype. They don't even consider it as like the normal part of their games. But it's there, it exists, it's, you can play it, but it's not normal for them. For them, that is not Turtles 1 at all. When we now jump into the arcade version, a lot of people know the 1989 arcade. That one's called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game. That got ported on to the NES, and that was called Turtles 2. Mm-hmm. Now, Turtles 2, you had to have Turtles 1 for that. Well, in Japan, that's just called Turtles, the arcade game as well. But a lot of people forget about Turtles 3, the Manhattan Project, came out right after Turtles 4 for the Super Nintendo. Like, the pacing of these release dates were almost like on top of each other because NES was still creating a bunch of game titles because people were still buying more and more of those consoles. Not until Super Nintendo really became entrenched in all households, so to speak, that then they started to slow down and cut off their NES supply of games, and people wanted to work on those because a lot of other companies wanted to be on the newest and greatest because they're thinking, we don't want to lose out on this potential money. If you guys aren't promoting this as much, we want to make sure that we're also getting the right kind of promotion. So Turtles 3, the Manhattan Project, if you're following the US names, now leads to Turtles 4, Turtles in Time. In Japan, Turtles 3, the Manhattan Project is called Turtles 2, the Manhattan Project. If you're going back and playing these things from Japanese version to the American version, you're like, wait a second, why are these numbers all messed up? And it all comes back to the prototype, where they didn't call Turtles 1, it was called Turtles Prototype. Now, based on the 80s cartoon version of the Turtles, the storyline is actually pretty wacky and true to form as the source material. A lot of people, when they see Turtles in Time, well, what the heck is this? All right, so the Turtles are it's 3 a.m. and they're, in the Big Apple. Okay, then they make their way on down to the streets or the alleys, and that's there. Okay, then from the alleys, they jump down into the sewers. So now they're in sewer surfing. All of this is making sense so far. Get to the Technodrome, of course. Who wouldn't get there from the sewer? Wait. They get warped back in time, and they're lost in time for level after level after level? Huh? Actually, this sticks to the formula that the TV show used. There was a lot of times that the content allowed them the ability to not have to always be linear. The show and the way that they had created allowed that they could kind of almost like in a waveform. They were never going to go too far away from what was Turtles, but they could go a little bit up, they go a little bit down, and they made it possible that way, which gave them a lot of flexibility. While watching a news report on the Liberty Island by April O'Neil, the Turtles witnessed Krang in his super suit fly up into the Statue of Liberty and hijacks it for Shredder. And then Shredder comes on TV to brag about the heist, goading them into confronting him and his subterranean mobile juggernaut, the Technodrome. Little do they know that it is all a trap, and Shredder sends them through his dimensional portal into a time warp. The heroes in a half shell must now battle their way through Shredder's freaky, messed up historical tour of the past and future to find a way home. These levels are fairly standard, and that's a good thing. As you stroll through the levels, hordes of foot soldiers, Mousers, and other enemies from the series will appear from all sides to attack in groups or hordes. We were talking about earlier, Ash was bringing up how enemies try to gang up on you. Same thing in Turtles. It's a brawler format, so when you have your character and an enemy gets you in a corner, the other ones, they're not going to fight you in the same spot. If they don't have to, they're going to start to try to wrap around your character. That's what they want to do. That's the idea behind Quarter Muncher. Now, environmental obstacles, though, open manhole covers, loose floorboards, stampeding dinosaurs, laser cannons, and much more led to so many unique difficulties you had to deal with besides fighting the Foot Clan. All of these things were taken from the TV show at some point in time. You had bad guys such as Baxter Stockman, the Rat King, Slash, considered the evil turtle, Metalhead, Taka and Razor, Bebop and Rocksteady, Leatherhead, Krang in 2 different forms in his Super Bio suit, and then in Little Krang form. And then you have Shredder, who will eventually fight in Super Shredder form. Something that was different between the Super Nintendo version and the arcade version, the bonus levels are actual bonus levels in the Super Nintendo version. Arcade version, you had to beat all the enemies on the screen, otherwise it's not going to keep on scrolling. It's going to look like it's scrolling, but the game's not going to keep actually progressing through it. In the Super Nintendo version, you don't have to fight the enemies. They're going to be on there for a limited time and it moves past. For a limited time and moves past. So those are things to take into consideration when comparing the 2 different types. Wait, that's not a bonus level in the arcade version. You're right. It's not. Even though we had these really cool bonus stages, there was also some really cool kind of pickup items, points, and whatnot that you could grab in different sections of the game. 2 of those aspects were what we call a bomb pizza. And a bomb pizza is one of those boxes that has like a bomb on it. It doesn't blow up everything on the screen. Instead, it turns your turtle into a killer cyclone. And it lasts for about 7 seconds. 7.5 seconds if you add the jump effect into it as well. Anything you hit, you're going to be doing almost maximum damage. The only thing that it takes 2 hits for are Stone Warriors. Stone Warriors have just enough health that it takes 2 hits when you're in the spin form to go ahead and destroy them. But it's pretty quick, so it almost feels instantaneous anyways. But there's pizzas on the level, and as we know, just like in real life, pizza refills our health, I'm pretty sure.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. And what was kind of cool about these games were that they also had little cutscenes of sorts kind of built in when they would talk before a fight. Problem is that they started running out of time and budgeting, and so that's why when you go back, there's a bunch of typos in this thing. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. There's tons of typos. The way they spell slime balls isn't right. Some of the commentary, like when they fall into a manhole cover or like the sewers open, so they fall into it and they say, "This cave is creepy." Some of these things don't even make sense. Like, they're from the sewer. They live in the sewer. They're not going to call it a cave. They're not going to be freaked out they fell in there. What the heck? Those things that happened were literally just because they ran out of budget, so they tried to get somebody to fill in. Like, okay, who can we get real cheap? Let's outsource it, get it done ASAP. And so some of those things happen, especially when they try to localize it for the US.
That's really bad. Like, that to me is so funny because Streets of Rage had a very similar issue. It's like you send your work out to get outsourced because time crunch, budgetary restrictions, whatever. Like, the game, people who want to sell the game yesterday. You know, they want their money. So then you hire these people to do that stuff, and then they make like weird choices like that. And then they probably don't have time to go back and make the changes. That's nuts. I always wondered that too. Like, that's kind of weird that they would say that, especially being that they live in the sewer. Like,
Exactly. It's so funny that when you play certain games, you're like, oh my gosh, just this game made this mistake. No, lots of them did. And both these titles are amazing titles. Streets of Rage is an amazing series, and the entire Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series is an amazing series. But budget crunch, time crunch led to them outsourcing, which meant that the people they were outsourcing to, most of them had no clue at all what they were writing for. Get the text, and they're like, okay, turn this into English. Okay, I will. And then you would think, like any of us who used to turn in papers for school, go back and proofread it, or hey, you're reading what you wrote, so you're gonna ask a friend to proofread it because they're gonna pick up on some of your mistakes that you're just gonna glaze over because you know what you're trying to say, but they're gonna be like, doesn't make sense. So it just shows that they didn't do any proofreading when it was all said and done. It's like, no, we gotta get it. We're trying to make that money yesterday, like Ash was saying. Get it out there. Go.
Like, you asked me to translate this. You didn't ask me to localize it.
So true. And it's like, no, I did my job. Yeah, you did your job.
I guess technically you did.
Going back on the idea of arcade style games, the levels and enemies are designed to be cheap and difficult with swarms of enemies. The idea was they wanted kids pumping quarters in if they lost lives, or if you were renting it from a movie rental store, that therefore you'd have to go back and rent it again. Or you'd have to extend the amount of time that you're having it from a 1-day rental to a 2 or 3 day rental, and they were getting more money because of that. Even though that happened, hardcore gamers want to see the true ending. Now, in Turtles, there wasn't alternate endings except if you played on different difficulties. The game would keep telling you, if you played on easy, okay, Turtles, you did a great job training. Now go try the game on normal. Go ahead and show that you've gotten better at this game. Then when you beat normal, it says, okay, you're still not true ninjas yet. Your training has improved. You need to now go to the next level of difficulty to really show that you are real ninjas. And then once you finally beat it on hard mode, now you get rewarded with this super long, beautiful cutscene, all these extra ways of showing off your turtles, showing off the bosses. Oh, wow. Like, you felt rewarded for beating the game, but that's because why? You had to play on the hardest difficulty to earn that specificity of the true ending of the game.
That always hurt my little gamer noob heart when you couldn't play a game on normal difficulty. You had to play it on like the hardest one to really get the actual ending.
When you say that, it always makes me think of like anytime I play a game for the first time, I'd always look to see if there was easy mode because I wanted to like progress through the game far enough to where like I learned some stuff. So when I come back to it, because every game to me, for the most part, is hard the very first time you play it because you don't know what to expect. A great example of this was I remember playing Smash TV, and Smash TV, you go and play it, and on easy, you're like, this isn't that bad. You go and beat the very first boss, and the game's like, all right, game over. Go ahead and play, you know, on the harder difficulty. It's like, wait, what? I only get to play one level? Come to find out, I had no idea as a kid, like how long the game was. Then the internet came around where you started to actually be on it more. You might go and jump on game FAQs, you know, you're like, it only has 4 levels. So I guess they gave you 25% of the game at that point in time. But like my mind was thinking like, you know, there's like probably 10 levels. It's like, why would you only give me 1? I feel so robbed.
I didn't even know that about Smash TV because I know I've only played a little bit of it. I know that's a tough game. So
yes,
wow,
it
yeah.
It really is. It takes so much focus for that game where you're like, let me play on the easier mode for a little while, please. Back into Turtles here. The difference being that in the 80s cartoons, they looked identical except for their different color headbands. Whereas in the comics and action figures, you could actually, with a lot of people in the chat were saying, they could see that there's a different shade of green to their skin. This trait really carries on over hard in the cartoon series that started in 2003. If anyone remembers that one. So you had your original cartoon series, then the 2003 one, which kind of takes place a little bit more in the future for the Turtles. This is them older. This is almost like them now. They're like college age Turtles. They're still technically teenagers because they're like 18 and 19 and 20, you know, within that range, right? But they are now in a much more real life situation as far as they're concerned. That's when the color scheme starts to come into play, and that's why they gave the option of animation and color, or sorry, animation and comic for your colors. Some animation was canon to one aspect and comic was canon to another aspect. And I thought that was really, really cool.
I like that. It's kind of like they blend the two worlds. That's really cool.
So you had the option, and that's what I thought was so cool. In the options, you get to choose like, hey, which one resonates more with you? And I thought that was just a stellar move by them to give you the option to choose your world of the Turtles that you wanted to see them represented in.
That's cool. Like, I always just thought of a visual, like just straight visual thing, you know?
Right,
but that's cool
absolutely.
to know.
Other things to go along with this, and this is one of my favorite things I like to bring up for Turtles 4, is we talked about Mode 7 a little bit earlier, but Mode 7 also brought the ability where you see us throw throwing foot soldiers at the screen. There's a good example right there. You can't throw Stone Warriors at the screen. They're way too big. Ability to do that was just so amazing. And in this game, you were actually able to choose to throw. Now, when you play the arcade version, You didn't get, it was just random. I looked it up. I was like, why can't I throw for sure on the arcade version? It didn't give you the option to make it in a specific move set. But on the Super Nintendo version, you're able to. And then on the Genesis version, you're not allowed to throw at the screen at all. I thought that was a really cool thing to consider in the lore of these games, where it's like, no way. So the literal production of the game, Mode 7, allowed for those kinds of things.
Depending on your tools or your limitations, it's going to affect the way that the story is told.
Exactly right.